cheers, Jeremy. Great to have you here.
Yeah.
How you been?
Very well, thank you. Yeah.
How's holistic lifestyle? How's the business going?
Yeah, it's going great. It's been a bit of a hard slog since the last time I saw you. I've just been working a lot more in the clinic with one of my other chiropractors being away for a bit. So yeah, just manning the fort a little bit more and not having as regular breaks as what I was. But he's back now, and yeah, so chilling out a little bit.
Yeah, you're still vibing high, loving it.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's been a great couple of years in doing all the clinical stuff and changing focus a little bit with upping the game a bit with that, and yeah, loving it.
Cool. Well, it's really great and an honor to get you back on the show. Got some great feedback from our last one, and even some regular students and regular listeners said that they managed to get in for an appointment, and it's been quite revolutionary for them to check out their poo situation and their gut situation. And huge feedback. It's been really positive. So awesome. Really great to hear on like a personal level and a local level and from the listeners. Great feedback.
Oh, it's good to hear. Yeah, I haven't heard much. So it's good to know that people appreciate it and I don't know, learn a few things.
Mm-hmm. So I want to pick your brain today and further share your wisdom with our listeners and myself. You know, it's a great learning opportunity for me too. I really appreciate your depth of knowledge. I thought it'd be great to start off on the fasting topic because it is quite a fad and people seem to be getting great results from it. I've been playing with it myself as well. I mean, for years I've done it mainly from a spiritual vantage point. Like I've found the benefits of fasting. I would do it from more a spiritual vantage point and still do. But lately, the more fad attraction to it is more of a physical thing, the benefits of the body and giving the digestive system a rest and the psychological benefits and so forth. I'd love to get your views on the fasting situation, maybe just on a nutritional level, on a physical level, maybe a spiritual level as well.
Sure. Well, I think there's lots of different components. I think you've touched on that quite nicely. You know, there's the spiritual components, there's the nutritional stuff, there's the gut healing side of things, there's longevity as well. So there's lots of different elements and, you know, I suppose different methods of fasting and timeframes and like most things, I suppose, in the modern world today with the advent of, the internet and blogs and all that kind of stuff, it can get a little bit confusing too, I guess. But I guess if we start with maybe the longevity side of it, that's the concept of that comes from the physiological process of autophagy. So which is kind of like a spring cleanse for the cells where they go into a state of cleaning out the organelles and the different components of the cells and some of the proteins in there and break it down and replace it with new fresh material, I suppose. And that's a process that it's largely inhibited when we eat. So fasting or starvation is required to really ramp up autophagy. The problem with that is it's quite strict. Like you can't, like, if you're going to fast, if you're going to have, you know, a bone broth or a coffee and chuck some butter in there or you know, have foods, you know, even if it's just a small amount, it can just really slow that process down, or you're not going to have the effects.
Anything over like a few calories,
exactly,
anything over like 10 calories will stop that, right? Yeah,
depending on each individual's physiological processes. Yeah, but it's in the realm of 300 to 500 calories for someone's like super active, right. and that they might be able to get away with, you know, maybe up to 500 perhaps. But the time frame's much longer than like your standard intermittent fasting or you're really sort of going more at least 16 plus hours, but, you know, more likely probably around the 48-hour mark of fasting to really ramp up that process. And that's going to ramp up autophagy and that cellular cleansing and that's what's linked to, I suppose, longevity. But a lot of other people are doing it for other reasons, inflammation control, just giving the digestive system a rest. You know, we're probably, for the most part, exposed to so much food now and the abundance of food that there's a lot of wastage, and so those less time frames, like your intermittent fasting, where you're doing like maybe an overnight or something, and not eating till lunchtime, you'll get some physiological benefits from that, but you're not probably going to get the strong longevity components that you're going to get from the longer fasts. Problems I see with it is if people's if they're already in a state of high stress and potential autoimmune issues going on, or autoimmune problems brewing, especially thyroid issues, and not to sound sexist or anything, but especially with women, it tends to, if they're in that state of already quite stressed, highly strung, and maybe a thyroid issue sort of brewing, that additional stress of a starvation or fast can really exacerbate that and make them worse. So I find in that sort of subset of population, probably they need to bring a few things into balance first if they're going to start playing around with that kind of thing and get the benefits from it. I think has the potential to sort of go pear-shaped with some of those populations for sure.
And what would be the feedback if someone was getting the negative of that? What just the stress getting even worse, or maybe holding on to the inflammation, stuff like that? What would be the feedback?
Yeah, I think if you're not feeling, if you're feeling worse, like you're finding that your energy levels are getting worse and fatigued, that's probably a good indication, because if everything's dialed in and you're doing really well, you'll probably notice when people talk about fasting that are doing it right and are already doing really well with it, they'll say they feel great with it.
Yeah, more focused,
Exactly.
stronger.
Yeah. Whereas if you're not getting that effect, then it's probably not quite right for you at that time.
And some people use the dialogue like it's a healing crisis. It's the cleanse before the good stuff happens. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, there could potentially be that, a little bit of, one step backwards, two steps forwards, especially, I suppose, in the, like when you're really first starting with it, then, and if you haven't done anything like that before, for sure.
It's used to eating constantly, it'll feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. So that's, I think, that's normal. But if you're having a go at it, let's say, for instance, you're trying intermittent fasting 2 or 3 times a week. You've been doing it for, a few weeks, to a month or something like that, and you're still not noticing any benefit, and you're still struggling a bit with it, then I'd say probably not quite right and ready for it. Maybe dial in a few other factors first and look at a few other things.
Yeah, I've been enjoying exploring it. I've never felt better, to be honest. I do it the other way around though. I often just a few times a week, 4 or 5 times a week maybe, I'll have my last meal at like 2 or 3 p.m. That's felt good for me, and going to bed feeling light. If I'm too hungry as I go to bed, and it doesn't work because then I don't even sleep because I'm too hungry. Yeah. But I have found that to be beneficial, going to bed feeling really light, really clear, and then waking up, doing a yoga practice or a workout, and then having a cold plunge and just having a 10-minute meditation in this pool is so fucking cold. It hovers around 10 to 12 degrees, so it's a legit cold plunge.
Yeah.
And with a bit of breath work, and then I'll have my first meal around 9 or 10 a.m. And that's felt really good. And that's been around the 16 to 19 hour mark. And what do you think of that order of things?
I think you're someone who's obviously quite in tune with your body, yeah?
Right.
Most people probably aren't quite at that level. So you've probably been able to figure out and what's right and being able to fine tune it quite well. But if that's working for you, then that's great.
But you wouldn't suggest that for someone just starting it?
Probably not. I guess it's a little hard for me because I because of the line of work that I'm in, and I generally see people who aren't well. So they're not. It's not like someone comes to me feeling $1 million and like, all right, Jez, what can we do?
Right.
How can we fine tune some things where these are the kind of things that are really going to probably benefit them, and some things they can tinker around with. When someone comes into me that's full of lots of chronic health issues, autoimmune problems, still trying to decipher and figure out stuff. It's not my starting point with them.
Yeah, of course. You got.
Yeah, I think the key, what I'm taking from what you've mentioned there is you've identified what works for you. Some people, I think that's important, and something we've kind of lost a bit of that. I suppose that soul connection and really like listening into the body, what feels right, what's not, and I think. As a whole, with just everything, really, we could do a lot better with identifying within ourselves, with, whether it's fasting or just the types of food that we're eating, and the types of exercise. Just listening into your body, what it really needs, than just because so and so said it, and or it's the latest fad and that kind of thing. I think just listening into the body a little bit more is probably more pertinent.
Totally, and even that, as simple as it sounds, it's big, We've never been, I guess, so out of rhythm with the earth in terms of sunrise and sunset and the rhythms, and in parallel with that, out of rhythm with our own bodies as well. And we've got, like you touched upon, we've got such abundance of food readily available, which is a blessing, but we can overload our system, right? Like it's quite unnatural to have the same foods constantly. We've never been able to do that until relatively recently, right? And I love that choice because I got my preferences of foods, but having the same thing day in, day out, year in, year out, couldn't be good for the body in long term. Would you agree? Or
I would agree for sure. And I think if probably a good example that I can share with you there is if you look at food sensitivity testing and LCATs and all that kind of stuff. The most common foods that crop up are the things that people eat all the time.
Yeah.
So if someone eats eggs every day for breakfast,
I was
generally,
just about to say that. Yeah, that was my case. I did a food. I had really, really bad. I cut you off big time there, but I had really bad adrenal fatigue that I just couldn't get on top of. I was trying everything. This was years ago now, and then a friend suggested a naturopath to go to who did the thorough blood test, real full spectrum food sensitivity test, and everything was fine except for eggs. That was off the charts. And at the time I was deep into my bodybuilding and just having eggs galore, and I thought healthy, you get told eggs are healthy.
Yeah.
And they are potentially, but I was having way too much. It was off the charts. And as soon as I took them out for a period, I gradually brought them back in moderately, but took them out for a period, and the adrenal fatigue went. It happened really quick once I eliminated that.
Yeah. So your immune system's basically just in overdrive. So and it's just taxing on the body. Like if your immune system's having to fight the whole time just because you're eating something and eating it a lot, then it's just in overdrive and working when it shouldn't have to be, and that flow-on effect to the next system in the body is, eventually you're going to get your fatigue and that kind of thing for sure. Yeah. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. But unfortunately, a lot of people go, a long time before identifying that, and it's not usually just one food. It's their 3 or 4 favorite foods. Some people, these are reactive to a lot of things. But there's other issues at hand there. But if you are eating those same foods every day, you're going to have a bit of a hard time. So I like the 4-day rotation diet's kind of good. Where you aim to not eat the same food within a 4-day period, just to allow for that, digestion, assimilation, and processing of the foods that's out of your body, and then reintroducing again. Sort of that 3 to 4 day mark seems to keep a lot of that at bay. But it's hard to do if you're like me. I like food too. I have my favourites, so totally. I'm gonna, I'm not by no means perfect myself, but I can identify within myself when something's not right, if I'm overdoing it.
Yeah.
And then I'll just, as much as I love it, it's got to go for a period of time.
A bit of healthy discipline, bit of restraint. Well worth it. I think I might have shared another example last time. I'm not sure if I did, but could be worth bringing up again, of this woman I knew in Canada who she was trying to fall pregnant and just couldn't. She was trying lots of different ways, traditional and alternative. And then finally, this doctor she was going to see for advice said, you got to get your thyroid and parathyroid removed, then you'll be able to get pregnant. And she didn't feel right. She's an intelligent woman. She just sat with that for a bit and talked to me for a bit and got some other opinions. And then she did a food sensitivity test as well. And what was off the charts for her was cranberries, because she was taking a shitload of cranberry juice for a urinary tract infection. And off the charts. So she took cranberry and cranberry juice out of her diet, the cranberry extract out of her diet, and gradually the sensitivity came down and she fell pregnant.
Wow.
I mean, it's dramatic. It's huge.
Yeah.
The mainstream diagnosis was get these two organs removed, these two glands, and you'll fall pregnant. Didn't feel right to her, so eliminated this. I mean, that's huge, huh?
Yeah. And I guess sadly that whilst that's a fortunate outcome in her case, it's I wouldn't say that's overly common. I think, well, maybe it is. I see these kinds of stories, quite frequently in clinical practice where they've gone down that path, and then I guess that's probably why they end up in our office, because as soon as you start doing that, then it's only a matter of time before the next thing and the next thing, and then they're in a state of quite serious chronic illness and requiring more quite in-depth help. But yeah, if that piece of information can filter through and help someone else, that's a win. Yeah,
for sure. Now, also wanted to talk about seasonal cleanses. It's another kind of fad thing to do. Seems like a healthy thing to do. Yeah. But what's your view on it? Like, what's a healthy, balanced way to have a seasonal cleanse, and what are some of the common, more extreme or imbalanced ways of doing seasonal cleanses? What are your views on that?
Yeah, so I have some views for sure, and I'd really like to share these ones because I do see some issues with this. So what I don't like seeing is when people, well, I guess if you're using it as an excuse to then, eat terribly and have poor lifestyle choices for, the next 3 or 4 months and then just go at it again and do a bit of a cleanse. I don't like that. But the main thing I don't like, one thing that really bothers me is when people take all these, herbal formulas and parasite cleansers and harsh herbal antimicrobials and that kind of thing, thinking they're doing the right thing. What often happens is it's going in blindly. So you might already have a gut that's in a relatively okay symbiotic relationship. And when I say that, the balance might be pretty good with, beneficial and harmful microbes and that kind of thing, might be in pretty well good check. You start taking, herbs and things like that, even though they're, quote unquote natural, they still have antibiotic effects. Some will argue that they have, they don't really nudge the beneficial microbes, but they do. They definitely, it's like that whole duality thing, right? Something can't be all good. So it's going to cause some collateral damage. And what I see is when people take these herbal formulas, they tend to really mess around with the gut microbiome, especially if you're doing it for, a month or something like that for quite a period of time. It really can cause some quite serious upset with that natural balance in there that might have already been okay. You might fluke it and it might actually work. It might, you might have some pretty serious gut pathogens, and by chance you might clear them out and not do too much collateral damage, and you cleaned your diet up a little bit in the meantime and had some fermented foods and that and kind of nourished it a little bit and might have fluked it. But I see it going wrong quite a lot. And I had this with myself. This was a learning experience that I had when I was, less informed and educated in this area. And I just thought, well, so-and-so says to do a cleanser, and this blogger and that blogger, and with no real skin in the game and probably clinical experience, and it's just another fad thing. So I took this. It was a 60-day cleanse, and you had to do your standard parasite formula and gut cleansing formula and bowel flushing, that kind of thing. And and prior to this, I never really had much health issues. Like I was in pretty good shape, and always had. If we're going to use your bowels as kind of the litmus test, I was always regular. Great. I do great poos on the Bristol stool chart, that kind of thing, and daily. Never had any issues with loose bowels or diarrhea or gastroenteritis, anything like that. I got into day 30 of this cleanse, and I basically developed diarrhea to the point where I was getting up probably 3 or 4 times, sometimes more during the night. So it's obviously starting to affect my sleep and that kind of thing. I'm working in a clinic with patients. I'm having to go in between patients to the toilet and just all day, just loose stools. And this went, and so I stopped everything in the cleanse. I was like, it's obviously something in this. And this persisted on for about 6 weeks, and with no change. It was just loose stools. So I did some researching and asked around and spoke to some of my mentors and that kind of thing, just to try and work out what the hell was going on here, and am I ever going to do a solid poo again, and starting to freak out a bit. And then it sort of bounced back eventually after that sort of 6 weeks. Things started, to improve quite, pretty good. But ever since then, I would say my digestion hasn't been like it was prior to that. And I really feel like it did some long-term damage. And
how long ago was that again?
That was probably about 10 years ago.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So and the consensus was, speaking, when we kind of worked around and figured it out, it was basically my gut microbiome probably was in a pretty reasonable, robust shape there, and I just completely messed it up and probably wiped out a lot of the beneficial microbes, and have been slowly rebuilding it, and have stumbled across this line of work with specific gut work, and I'd say I'm 95% now through
Have you
all
done
the
the
work.
poo transplant? You got anyone else's good poo?
No. I feel I don't feel I'm in that camp at all. No, I feel my point is I'm just not quite where I was prior to that, and I feel like it's something that I am a bit passionate about. It drives me mad when I see all these people just doing these, and I won't name names of formulas and that, so I don't want to get in trouble.
Good to know that, because I do that every now and then, for sure. And
maybe there could be an argument for very short periods,
right?
But look, and I'd say anything over a week, I'd be a bit concerned.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some of these herbs are pretty harsh, and then there's also essential oils as well, right? People
It's
popping
true.
essential oils left, right, and centre.
Yeah, that's
orally.
something I've been cautious about for quite a while, thanks to, do you know Hauke B in Fremantle? She's an aromatherapist just around the corner. But she brought that to my attention. And it makes sense how strong essential oils are when you think of how many herbs or how many plants are condensed into that tiny little bottle, and then we're gulping it down, and that's become mainstream, kind of faddish as well. And a particular company I'm sure a lot of people would be aware of has spread that message that it's safe, but it can really screw with your gut, huh?
Huge. Yeah. And I mean, I know some health practitioners who they claim that that essential oils don't wreck the beneficial microbes, and it's just the pathogens they're going after. I don't believe that. And yeah, I can't see that being the case, and that they are extremely potent. I think there's a place for them. Like, don't get me wrong, but in the right hands and the right care, and with the appropriate testing and the right dosage and time frame. But I think people just need to be a bit cautious.
Yeah, kind of respected like medicine, huh?
Yeah. Well, look at oregano, for instance. I mean, you
I was
put it
about
on
to
a
bring that
wart,
up,
it'll burn it off.
Yeah, when I was living in Canada, everyone was gulping down oil of oregano to wean off flus and colds, and I was as well.
Mm. I've done it as well.
Yeah, and like so intense, just burning on the way down. But I learned to love it. I learned to appreciate it, and I would feel it wean off the bad colds and flus. But then it was brought to my attention, like, that's pretty much burning your gut.
Yeah.
And I'm much more cautious.
So have it when you need, very, very short periods, that kind of thing. And
I was taking a shitload of it, like bottles of it, huh?
Yeah.
But I don't think it's done too much damage. I think I might have quite a resilient gut. I don't know, because looking back, I've done some pretty radical stuff. A lot of those herbal cleanses that you're speaking of, a lot of that oil of oregano for a 2-year period there while I was living in Canada. I don't know, but the gut seems to be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've done well, yeah.
Yeah. Apple cider vinegar. Are you a fan of apple cider vinegar? I take quite a bit of that.
Yeah. I mean, just, it's vinegar at the end of the day. Just obviously be cautious with the acidity and that kind of thing, with the enamel of your teeth and your esophagus, that kind of stuff. So probably just make sure it's dilute. I think, it's one of those things that stood the test of time, right? Like, how many people anecdotally have report how it alleviates so many different symptoms for them. I think we might have touched on this last time in the podcast, apple cider vinegar. I feel like I've talked about it.
We went deep into the kombucha thing, and that
might have sparked a bit of that.
Yeah, we found the apple cider vinegar might have come into that, but we were talking about Joe's revelation that she was having a kombucha every day, but it was exacerbating her candida, and then that opening up a whole deeper investigation. I don't know if we went into
could have come about because with kombucha, there's a lot of depending on how it's fermented, that it can be quite acetic acid and things like that, which is pretty much like your apple cider vinegar and the benefits from that. It will alter pH, all kinds of stuff. But again, like, people just need to, is it work out, is it serving them or not? Like, if they've got reflux and stuff like that and they're taking it and it's helping, and it's probably their mechanism behind their reflux probably is hypochlorhydria, where they don't have enough stomach acid. But if it's making it worse, then they could fall into that category where they actually do have too much acidity in their stomach and coming back through. And
So what would you recommend for seasonal cleanse, or not? Just keep it balanced.
Yeah, I think with like just making sure this isn't seasonal, but just consistency, making sure you're eating these foods like, oregano, rosemary, lavender, thyme, all those things that, a lot of those antimicrobial essential oils that are in those formulas. If you're just eating the whole food source and adding them into your cooking consistently, garlic, turmeric, ginger, all those kinds of things, you're going to have, a low dose, less invasive antimicrobial effect with balancing out some of those pathogens and keeping things in good order in your gut consistently, as opposed to trying to, hit, every 3 or 4 months with a nuclear bomb and just wipe it out with the harsh stuff. I think if you just have those things consistently, then that's gonna help and go a long way and alleviate the need for doing, the strong stuff for any length of time.
Another common thing that a lot of yogis do and people getting ready for medicine journeys and so forth is like the miracle cleanse. Have you heard of the miracle cleanse? That's like, it's pretty intensive fasting with just peppermint tea, apple cider vinegar, cayenne pepper, and maple syrup. So you just have those fluids in the morning and then you're pretty much fasting for quite a long period. I'm not sure how long. It's like a 10-day fast of just having those liquids or something like that, with some, I think, some of those herbs to help wash out the digestive tract or whatever they want to call it. I'm not too sure, but they call it the miracle cleanse.
Right.
And one of the aims is to keep doing it until you poo out the lining, they describe
mucoid plaque.
The mucoid plaque, yeah, and that's like success.
People confuse that with parasites and worms,
Right.
but it's literally I suppose part of the lining of the GI tract. I'm not overly familiar with that particular cleanse, but I do use a formula that's quite similar, more with clients on like a consistent base, like the cayenne pepper and apple cider vinegar, lemon, and a couple other little things here and there and make up a drink.
Similar,
and I mean, that's going to help break the things in there, help break down bacterial biofilm and yeast spores and stuff like that. And so again, but that's more like the consistency thing, like have kind of people doing that a bit more consistently than for that chunk of time. But yeah.
So it's not a bad thing to get that mucoid plaque out. You kind of want to every now and then, or what do you think?
It's a good question. I can't say I can give you a good answer on that one, yes or no. If I think about it,
the silent wisdom of Jeremy.
Nothing's really coming to me on that.
To be continued.
I'll look into it.
Yeah, please do.
You've sparked my curiosity now. It comes up quite often, and I've never really delved into how important it is to get that mucoid plaque, or if it's potentially dangerous. But interesting, so starvation or intermittent fasting and things like that, the longer you do that fasting period, it actually upregulates certain microbes in the gut. So a good one, quite a well-known one now is Akkermansia mucinophilia. I think that's how you pronounce it. But it basically it feeds off mucin in the gut lining. So when we starve or fast, then the bacteria get hungry, right? So they need to feed. So Akkermansia will start feeding off, if it's not getting any prebiotic fiber in your food and things like that, it'll start literally eating the gut lining. So some people, that will work really well for them. Some people may already have too much Akkermansia in their gut. So why I bring that up is if this mucoid plaque is part of the mucin and that gut lining, then maybe there's beneficial microbes that might be able to do that process for us. That's a bit less invasive than doing, say, a 10-day fast and with all these things where, maybe just shorter periods like 16-hour fasts or overnight fasts and things like that upregulates Akkermansia and it kind of does that process a bit more gently and less stressful. Could be an option as well. Yeah, because that particular microbe as well is what's known as a butyrate-producing microbe. So butyrate's a fatty acid that's just quite beneficial. It helps feed other beneficial microbes in the gut, controls inflammation, that gastrointestinal permeability or leaky gut, it helps regulate that, the immune system inflammation. So there's a big focus in research in the gut world on these butyrate-producing microbes. So long story short, they have shown that fasting is a way of upregulating some of those microbes that produce butyrate. So does exercise actually as well. So exercise, they've been shown that consistently seems to upregulate maybe Akkermansia, but definitely Faecalibacteria prausnitzii and certain Clostridia species, and I think Bifidobacteria as well, that tend to produce butyrate too.
Cool. On that note, let's talk about the probiotics, the bacteria. So I and a lot of people would just think probiotics are good. You hear that they're good, so get a shitload of probiotics into you. But
it means pro-life, I suppose. Okay. If you break down the probiotic in the Greek, I think it's Greek or Latin or whatever, just probios means for pro-life.
I like that. So get them into you.
Yeah.
But would you say that some are good for some people, some are not? You kind of want to work out what probiotics to have, or
yeah. Well, just so people are all on the same page, there's a few different categories of probiotics. So there's There's like the Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium.
Which is the common one most people know about it.
Definitely,
huh?
yeah. Which only make up a very small percentage of the gut microbiome, but that's what's readily available in a supplement. There's a couple others. There's one called, the commercial name is Mutaflor, but which is a E. coli strain, a beneficial E. coli strain. And then there's the spore-based probiotics as well that are coming out. They're gaining more traction, and there's nowhere near the amount of research as what you have with Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. But they're more your soil-based organisms, or what they call spore-forming ones. So the Bacillus group, basically. There's a few different ones of those. And there's a Enterococcus strain you can get as well. But by far, Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium are most popular and readily available from your health food shops or practitioners. And it's I suppose the important thing to understand with that in terms of, is, so if we break down if we give a bit of a lesson here, so Lactobacillus, let's pick on that one. So Lactobacillus is the genus, and then you've got, say, Lactobacillus genus, Rhamnosus is the species, and then you've got as a specific genetic strain after that. So it might be the strain GG or HN001, and it's the strain specificity that's important. So you can have two probiotic species that have the same name. So let's say Lactobacillus plantarum, the 299V strain has been shown to have beneficial effects with medically diagnosed irritable bowel syndrome. But the Lactobacillus plantarum, I think it's M1298 or MF1298, something like that. Basically same name, Lactobacillus plantarum, but two different strains. One's 299V, helps IBS. The other one, M1298, let's say MF1298, that actually exacerbates irritable bowel syndrome. So the importance is it's not so much the Lactobacillus or the Bifidobacterium, it's within that then the species and then the strain that's important.
Right.
So I think probiotics really, your Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium are best just used therapeutically. I don't see any benefit really for people going to a health food store and going and buying, an Inner Health Plus or something that they have access to, because it may actually cause more harm than good. Some people may already have a lactobacillus overgrowth. That does happen. We see that probably maybe, if I'm going to guess, 5% of cases on stool testing, maybe a little more. So you probably want to be careful with them anyway. But so it's more using them therapeutically. I think I don't see a point in really taking them because they're a probiotic and that's what's associated with benefits. Like I said, some can obviously do more harm in certain situations. Right. And then there's other things as well, like some speed up transit time, some slow it down. So, if you've got someone with constipation, you want, there's some really good specific strains that really will help increase bowel transit time. But there's others that make it worse. So, and then take the opposite of that, diarrhea, give them the ones that are going to speed up transit time. It's just going to make it worse. So I think the point is like I don't see why people need to throw money into that sort of stuff. I think you're better off putting that money into working with a practitioner that's skilled and educated and understands the specifics of them.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Good to know. I think for a lot of people it'd be useful for them to slow that down. That was a lot of information, but I think really helpful for people because
it's easy.
Potentially too much of a good thing would be a bad thing,
Yeah.
We think it's just good, but you can overload yourself, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're a visual learner, it's easy to conceptualize that on, like when I do presentations and things like that, I can clearly put it, in visual form, and it's pretty easy to appreciate that. It's probably just my poor ability to articulate it in a non-visual way. I'm a very visual learner, so to try and describe it non-visually is quite challenging.
So
but
go to a workshop if you didn't. Have you got any workshops coming up? Or
No, none scheduled. I will probably film a lot more though. That's sort of in the pipeline to have it a bit more available. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate your investigation into it all, you know, not just kind of taking it for, there's an investigation that you go deep into, which I really appreciate. Where are you at with, I'm kind of picking apart a lot of the fads right now that are in the collective lingo in the community, but medicinal mushrooms, which I love. But are you big on the mushroom kingdom?
Yeah, well, I think probably since last time we spoke, that's probably one area where I've gone into quite a lot more research. So mainly because the life cycle crew sort of reached out to me and wanted to know if I'd be interested in their stuff and take a look. So I've been investigating that a bit. The one I really, I suppose, have become fascinated with is Trametes versicolor or turkey tail.
Right. Yes.
Because of the gut side of things that has. I did write a blog post on it. It's not an overly long one. It was just sort of a succinct one that kind of summarised the gut modulating effects of that. And the reason I quite like that and do promote using that, and I use it clinically too now. So, whereas before it was more, I suppose more herbs and stuff like that. But this is I actually use it with an intention in mind based off testing. But it's almost like the perfect. It's one of those perfect combinations of seems to have antimicrobial properties. So going back to what we talked about before with those cleansers and that, and I said that a lot of these herbs have they cause collateral damage. Well, if you look at turkey tail, it seems to fit into that world of, yes, it has antimicrobial properties against things like Enterococcus and some of the Clostridia species, I'm pretty sure, but and I think even Staphylococcus. But it has prebiotic properties that seem to preferentially feed things like Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, possibly Akkermansia. I can't recall off the top of my head, but it seems to fit into that world of it's almost it does have it doesn't seem to cause a collateral damage like some of those other things. It has the selective antimicrobial properties, but also the prebiotic and properties that seem to feed a lot of those beneficial microbes.
Cool.
Plus, I mean, there's definitely a lot of research on the anti-carcinogenic properties of those mushrooms. What else is there? The effects on some of the inflammatory cytokines and that kind of thing is quite positive as well. So yeah, I do really like them. I don't think they're a fad.
Yeah, it's valid.
Yep,
yeah,
for sure.
Cool.
And then there's a lot of other ones. You've got your lion's mane and reishi and shiitake and cordyceps. I quite like cordyceps, but I think lion's mane's definitely got a lot of research around the neurogenesis, so it seems to help really support the myelin in the nervous system, which is that it's kind of like that fatty acid around the nerves that helps with conductivity. So that's why I think people are using that more for the brain stuff, just sharpening up cognition and things like that. But interestingly, I've heard a few people say that it seems to really help with inducing or improving deep REM sleep. So I always took it in the morning, just thinking it was,
get you sharp.
Yeah. But I've played around now with taking it at nighttime, and I will, I'm not tracking my sleep with anything fancy or anything like that. I'm just going more with how I feel in the morning and my state of dreaming and dream recall and that kind of thing. And I do feel that I've noticed improvements with taking it at night, and it certainly hasn't negatively affected my sleep. So I like the mushrooms.
Yeah, so do I. I heard a talk from Paul Stamets talking about his studies on lion's mane, and he was stacking, we might have even talked about this last time, I'm not sure.
Possibly.
But he was stacking lion's mane, niacin, and a full dose of psilocybin, like a full trip. And so the full dose to go on like a psychedelic journey with psilocybin lit up the brain in a particular way, as does the lion's mane. And then the niacin apparently provides a bit of a catalyst and drives it into any damaged pathways or assists in that as a bit of an ally. And he's been doing studies on that being beneficial for people even with Alzheimer's and dementia, and it having huge benefits in helping even stop it or reverse it.
Wow.
I mean, he did say it's in the early days of it, but it's looking really hopeful. It's looking really good. So I found that quite interesting, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be interested to look into a bit of that for sure.
Yeah.
See a bit more.
On the niacin note, what do you know much about the niacin flush?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your views on that?
So niacin, I used to do it quite a bit when I was in the conventional saunas. When I was living in Perth, I used to go to Fitness First back in the day, and I used to do it quite a bit. Actually, I think you've interviewed Simon Martin on your podcast
we've
before.
We've done a bunch of niacin flushes together.
Yeah. I'm wondering, he might have introduced it to me, but we used to do it anyway when you're sort of young and you want to try different things. And but I did try it again recently because we have an infrared sauna in our clinic as well. And I did it, and it did a relatively low dose, and I didn't feel great. Like I actually got out. When I did get out and hopped in the shower, I quickly laid down in the shower because I felt I was about to pass out. Like I got that feeling that I was going to really flake out, and I laid down. But it's an interesting one, and I'm not too sure of the exact mechanisms, but you know, some people talk about how they reckon it bursts the fat cells. So it's a great way of, like prior to a sauna, you take niacin. It causes for those who don't know, it's basically vitamin B3, but the flushing version. So it causes a mass vasodilation.
Not the niacinamide. Right?
Exactly, yeah. So that won't cause any flushing. It's a different mechanism. But yeah, so you get like that really hot, prickly, tingling sensation, and some people say it bursts the fat cells. So then the idea is you take it prior to a sauna, you jump on a rebounder or something like that, or go for a bit of a quick run and just get your heart rate up and mobilize it a bit. And then you jump in the infrared sauna to facilitate the detoxification and get rid of the toxicity that's released, because basically fat stores toxins and heavy metals and glyphosate, all that stuff. So the idea is it's a way of really speeding up detoxification. Interesting, I actually read one of L. Ron Hubbard's books. I think it's called Clear Body, Clear Mind, something like that. And it's all based around not the niacin protocol with niacin protocol with infrared saunas, or maybe not infrared, but saunas. He was using it. It's in I think he had a centre where they were using it for things like addiction and depression, anxiety and stuff like that, but really pushing the boundaries, like quite high dosages and sauna, and you do it for 30 days and quite long saunas and stuff like that. And
like every day for 30 days.
Something like that, yeah. I can't recall the exact specifics, but supposedly has all these success stories and things like that.
What's the book called again?
I think it's Clear Body, Clear Mind.
Okay, I'll Google it because
it's quite
I'm
interesting.
Yeah, because I have felt benefits from it.
Yeah.
I just don't, because I also hear probably equal negative feedback about it. Like it's too hard on the kidneys and it's too much, just too much.
Yeah, there's a possibility, and I'd have to look into it a bit more. But within the whole methylation process, if it might be one of those situations where if you're already an over-methylator or something like that, it might exacerbate that. And that might be why some people don't do so well on it, whereas other people do really well. So it could be one of those things, as more information has come out now, especially around B vitamins prior to L. Ron Hubbard's days and those kinds of people, it might be that we might have information now that puts people into categories like, all right, this population probably will benefit from it, whereas this population, we might need to look at other ways of their detox protocols. Possibly. That's my thoughts on that. But
because I recall David Wolfe speaking about the gradual increase of dose of niacin, starting one pill, which is about 100 milligrams. That's the dosage. That's pretty general. Yeah. And then each time going up another 100 and taking it
I
all
went
the way
with
up to like
50 milligrams. I started at 50 and would go up in It was either 50 increments. But when I went in the sauna, when I did it again recently, which has been a few years, admittedly, since I was doing it a bit more consistently, I started, I think it was pretty low. It might have even only been 25 milligrams and had that sort of weird, not so pleasant feeling.
Right.
But I didn't get much of the flushing, which was the odd thing. And I mean, I'm in the sauna quite a lot. It wasn't like, all the other variables were controlled, but it really did something more, seemed to have some sort of possibly vasovagal issue. I don't know.
Interesting. What else are you vibing off right now? What's exciting you right now in Jeremy's world?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose I've been down this rabbit hole of the gut health world for quite a while now, and you know, I've run well over 1,000 stool tests and worked clinically in it for quite some time, and I do get bored pretty easy. I'm a Sagittarian, and you know, for instance, when I finished uni, I did an extra 2 years sports chiropractic and thought I was going to be a sports chiro, but you know, I did it for a bit and worked over in the States and a bit over here with the cricket, and eventually I just got sick of that, and then I got into this gut health stuff. But I feel like I'm probably getting to that point where, not once I'm losing interest in it, but I'm looking at other things now. And actually, a bit has happened since I last spoke to you.
Yeah,
I don't know why that completely escaped my mind. I can't remember if you asked me this while we're on the show here, or if it was more beforehand when we were up in your house there asking what's been going on. But I actually did this process called the Hoffman process. I went over to Byron Bay. It seemed a relatively well known. I suppose it's kind of like I suppose it would fall in the personal development world, and it was. That was an amazing experience. Like, it's like a week-long process where you go out in the Byron hinterland and you're in this retreat centre completely off the grid. You have to hand your phone in and everything, and you're in a group of about 20 odd people, and you split into 3 smaller groups, and you go into sort of self-discovery, I suppose, and into your childhood and parental upbringings and all those influences and stuff like that, and just trying to do some deep healing work around those early years of your life and that kind of thing. And I think the reason I bring that up is I suppose it was a bit shaky. I'm a pretty well grounded person, have, you know, by all means, probably, you know, have my shit together and that kind of thing. But in some ways, what I took from that is I'm pretty good at covering up too, right? So on the exterior, you know, people might look at me and say, oh, you know, you got this, you know, this thriving practice and your clinic's pumping and that kind of thing. And so a lot of it's kind of cover-ups too. Like, I've created all that around probably some insecurities as well. And so it's kind of a trait that I guess I've probably picked up, probably more so from my dad. I've been really sort of still processing and integrating in after that, and doing a lot of follow-up work and still riding that wave a little bit. So I guess this year's been a little bit shaky in that sense, while still, you know, doing a lot of inner work while still working with people as well. So I think so going to your question, what excites me is integrating some of that and working more personally. So doing a lot more inner work and working on myself and my relationships with people, and but more so that relationship with myself. So I'm quite fascinated with that, and continuing to ride that wave a little bit, and learning some of the things that I picked up from there, and using that in a clinical setting as well. And I guess not being quite so technical with, because, you know, it's easy to get caught up in this whole gut microbiome and, you know, the specifics and the science of it all, but there's so much more. I mean, like, so all this, you know, the stress and even going back to, you know, all these, you know, your emotional stuff, that a lot of things that haven't been dealt with. And I'm quite fascinated in that stuff, and the emotional connection and some of those blockages that people have, and those effects with why they're coming into the clinic. Like, for instance, someone that comes in with constipation, where they're going weeks without, having a bowel movement, that kind of thing, like thinking beyond just the gut microbiome side of it, which has its place for sure, and we can certainly help with that. But why is that person holding on? Was there something, was it, some sort of trauma or abuse or something where, things are just shut down? So that kind of excites me.
That's huge, man.
Yeah.
Super good to hear. I didn't know. I didn't know you went on that retreat journey, and really beautiful to hear you be really vulnerable and honest with that, It's beautiful hearing that from a strong man, and you admitted to like the kind of positive stuff being a facade, which is super common. And it's beautiful, like, and you got it all happening, but to admit like, yeah, it's awesome, but it is kind of like it's distracting me from the deeper stuff, So to be fully honest with that and go for it and get vulnerable. I mean, it's going to take the holistic lifestyle to another level, isn't it? I mean,
it is, yeah.
That's awesome. And to also see that kind of gut, mind, well-being, like the full, like truly holistic, that's exciting.
In fact, when we put the post up about were there any specific questions, someone did ask about the mental health side of things with the gut microbiome. So I guess if we want to look at that side of it, there's within the gut microbiome, there's huge overlap with, the microbes and the mental health side of things. Like, I could get super technical and geeky with you on those mechanisms.
I'll tell you if it gets too much.
Yeah. So there's two types of bacteria in your gut. There's gram-negative and gram-positive. So gram-positive, they're okay, but gram-negative, they have a double cell wall membrane around them, and in that is what's called lipopolysaccharides or endotoxins. So what happens is if you've got a lot of these gram-negative microbes and they're shedding off those lipopolysaccharides and endotoxins, the problem is they cross get into the systemic circulation, and so if we step back a little bit, if we look at tryptophan, so tryptophan can go down two pathways. There's one pathway that goes to 5-hydroxytryptophan and then to serotonin and then melatonin. I've missed a few steps in there, but it's a desirable pathway. And then the other pathway that tryptophan can go is more of an undesirable situation. So the point of this is the lipopolysaccharides and endotoxins upregulate the enzymes that shunt tryptophan down that negative pathway, as opposed down to the pathway that produces serotonin and melatonin, all those beneficial neurotransmitters. So
they get produced in your gut, don't they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That I think would be a big information for some people. That's quite huge to know. Even that's produced in your gut. Keep going. So
yeah. So you've got that mechanism. Then you've got certain species of microbes that produce things like GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, helps calm you down. Others that produce serotonin and dopamine. But there's all that mechanism, that whole gut-brain axis, and then you've got your vagus nerve that connects your gut and your brain, and there's this cross-talk with those neurotransmitters going up and down and having those effects on the mental health and anxiety, depression, all those kinds of things. But there's that, but then there's also there's the other direction as well. There's the brain down. So going back to what we just left off with there, with I suppose my own personal journey with doing the Hoffman process and things like that, you can't have one without the other. It's easy for me to get caught up in a clinical setting with, looking at the gut side of it and all these different, lipopolysaccharides and gram-negative bacteria and helping people through that. But there's still a huge chunk that's up here that needs to be dealt with, and that's where I suppose where the that co-management with people is really important, and having the right people to really sort of holistically tackle all avenues, because I can pick it pretty easy, like who's a candidate for, yes, this is your anxiety, your mental health, largely to do with what's been going on in your gut, but it's energetically it's quite easy to pick up. All right, this person's someone who's had a lot of abuse or trauma or in toxic relationships and all that kind of stuff. And there's other things. There's more someone else needs to manage this, and they need something else.
Yeah, that's exciting, man. No, it's inspiring, you know, the full picture. And I think it's also good to admit, like, someone else can do that, you know, like that's why I really also appreciate like Ken Wilber, you know, who's considered a very masterful teacher, but he'll be the first to admit like an area of expertise where it's like, that's for someone else. I can give you the map. I'll do this, I'll do that, and then let's get so-and-so to do that, the psychological component or the gut component or something like that. And I think that's really helpful. A lot of our listeners would be yogis, you know, and yoga can potentially take care of a lot of stuff, but some yogis have gone to you. They're like, I need something else. I need to take care of the gut situation. And then that's helped their yoga practice. Some yogis that have that deep trauma and just contemplating alone or just meditating or just doing the vinyasa practice or breath work hasn't been enough. So they've gone to a psych or something like that, you know? So it seems really healthy to merge different modalities, you know, and look at the full picture, you know? So it's exciting where you're going with that, huh?
Yeah.
Anything else exciting before we wrap it up, or that's about it?
That's probably enough. Yeah, that's enough of a can of worms for me to open up and get me excited. I probably don't really need too much more. But
we'll check in another few months again, see where it's all at. But really, Jeremy, it's an inspiration. You're such an inspiring dude, and it's an honor to have you here again. And
likewise, and
it's picking your brain.
It's an honor to be on your podcast, and you're someone that I do hold in high regards and really enjoy being in your presence and your company. And you're just a great guy, and you know we haven't spent a heap of time together, but you know I always feel when I'm in your presence that you've got this beautiful energy about you, and someone who if you're going to reach out and ask me to be involved in something, I'll shift things to make sure it happens, because you're doing good stuff.
Oh, beautiful, Jeremy. Let's have more tea and some chocolate and celebrate the day.
Sounds great.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, you.